Hello everybody and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 322. My name is NVZ and Bally's not here, unfortunately, as we all know. Was turned into a snake and decided to go live in the hills and, you know, just having a great time there, having a good time hanging out with all the other snakes. It's really fun for him. I'm sure it's great. And, you know, he can't, you know, communicate anymore, so we have to, like, hiss at him. So send all your best hisses to Bally in the comments and, yeah, we'll get the... all the messages his way. I'm, of course, joined by someone who hasn't been turned into a snake. It's Matt Lorigan. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, I am trying my absolute best to yes and this, and
Okay.
I don't, as we all know, turned into a snake.
Yeah, it's terrible. This is a disaster.
Terrible time. I was more going to go for the angle of, like, he's not here, which means they got on the holiday, which I know was a concern at one point, right?
Yeah.
Before the whole snake situation.
Before the snake situation. Of course, the snake situation means that the holiday was completely off. But yes, no, I think it's all worked out. So it sounds good. He had his birthday also, so belated happy birthday to Bally over there. So I'm sure he's having a grand old time. But we are here because he's not, and he decided actually the reason he turned into a snake is because he saw all those animals in Star Fox and was like, that's a good idea, I should become one of those because Nintendo have turned them all into real animals. So that was kind of his master plan. He's hoping to join the crew at some point as the fifth member of the Star Fox team. So yeah, unfortunately he's not here for this because I think I'd be very interested to see what he thinks, but I'm sure we will have plenty of time in the future to discuss that as we shall be discussing on this here show. Yeah, Matt is a bit of an expert on the topic. So we were out drinking a few weeks ago, and you were telling me about your journey through the Star Fox series. So that will be very helpful for this episode in particular, because we're going to talk about that new game that's coming out. Or is it a new game? Question mark. And also, yes, your classic tendency to go through entire video game series back to back, which I do appreciate, which gives us a good historical lens, I guess, coming into Star Fox 2026. So that'll be the back half of the show, but we're going to start things off with the video games that we have been playing. And Matt, both you and I have played a new video game that has come out, and that there's a lot of conversation about.
Oh my God.
I don't know that I would necessarily want to. Maybe we kind of like park that side of it for like after we actually talk about the video game first.
Yes, please.
But
yeah.
there's a lot to get into there. But we have been playing Mixtape. I say been playing. It's a game that I think both of us basically finished in one sitting. I played it on a Saturday all the way through. I lie. I came back drunk from having been out and decided it was a good idea to play the first 20 minutes before I went to bed. That was a bad idea. And then I came back the next day and kind of started over and was like, okay, let me actually like pay attention to this thing. So it's very short. It's I think it took me 3.5 hours. How about you?
Yeah, I think mine was maybe just under 3 hours, or about 3 hours on the dot.
Right, I'll tell you why mine's longer is because I sat in that skipping stone segment for maybe 25 minutes trying to hit every single thing that popped out the wall. It keeps going, by the way. There's like more things that pop up. There's like a giant basketball net that shows up at one point. Like there's drums that appear and you have to hit the drum. They actually, if you want to stay there and do that bit, they keep going with that bit. They yes and you with that for a very long time. So I basically went as long as you could on that little section. So that probably accounts for my additional time in the game. But I guess a bit of history on the studio. Beethoven and Dinosaur, a cool name for a studio. And also I wonder, because I'm kind of looking out for this, do they reference both dinosaurs and Beethoven in this video game? Because I feel like that's their trademark now, is to reference both of those things in their games. Because I believe The Artful Escape had references to both. But there is like a little musical section that I think is Beethoven, and there's obviously a section where you go to like a dinosaur theme park, basically. So yeah, that's a fun thing. But yes, these devs made a game called The Artful Escape that came out a few years ago, a game I really enjoyed. I think it was my number 4 game of that year. Very much connected with me. And yeah, I was looking forward to what they were doing next. I don't know if you had any history playing The Artful Escape, Matt.
No, I think I heard really good things about it. Every time I watched a video of that game being played, there was something about it where I was like, I don't wanna.
Right.
Don't wanna. But I think this is quite a different game aesthetically, and like feels like it's going for a different type of experience. It still has like that slight dreaminess, I think, that the Artful Escape has, but it's not as persistent, I'd say.
Right. The Artful Escape was very surrealist. I would say it was both games are musically focused. I think that's kind of their thing. Like, music is kind of a driving force behind it. That game was more about like someone who was trying to find their musical identity, essentially, and trying to not be kind of boxed into an identity that they kind of didn't want to be. And yeah, I really, really liked it. I think the voice acting was excellent. They had some top-tier voice talent, which tends to be the case with Annapurna published games, is that they have those kind of movie connections as well. And so I think Carl Weathers was in The Artful Escape, I believe the last role before he passed away, which is kind of wild.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, some other big name. I feel like Lena Headey was in it or something. There's a lot of like famous people in The Artful Escape, voice acting wise. It was very high quality voice acting, and a well told story, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, despite the fact that it was a kind of like walk from left to right a lot of the time, and sometimes do a knee slide, and basically like a light platformer is what you could say, with some almost like Simon Says musical interludes here and there, but a great soundtrack that very much was on my wavelength for the type of music that I enjoy. So I very thoroughly enjoyed The Artful Escape. And so coming to Mixtape, interested to see what it was. Obviously they're taking on 3D now, which is different and more challenging, and lots of licensed music here, lots of really kind of big tracks, which I was wondering, like, how expensive must this game have been to produce, because I have heard dollar figures before for licensed stuff during my work, and I've been like, okay, that's just for like a trailer or something that we were talking about. For a whole video game, I can't imagine how much that stuff cost. But I've listened to some interviews, and it sounds like they managed to get some decent rates on it, but nevertheless, it would have been a pretty expensive production.
When you consider, like, there are AAA games, right, that get taken down from sale because those massive publishers go, no, we're not paying for this like license anymore. So for a smaller game like this,
which I guess is a worry for the future of this game, of like, if one of those license holders decides, nah, you're not doing it anymore, it could be in a state of being pulled down from storefronts potentially, which, I don't know, that would not be great, but I wonder if they must have thought about that and kind of hopefully protected against it. But it's the case with like Forza games as well, with stuff they have on the radio, where it just gets delisted after a certain amount of time. I believe the original Nintendo Switch announcement trailer, there was something to do with the music license. I remember Kit and Chris talking about that, where the music license for that song expired, and so that's why that original trailer got taken down. So anyway, music licenses can be, let's say, the worst. I have many times complained about our situation on Spotify, where we have any kind of music in this podcast and they send us a takedown notice, and I'm like, well, that sucks. I mean, no one's listening to this podcast to listen to, I don't know, Kirby and the Forgotten Land track 50, but that seems like that's the way this industry operates, which is potentially quite frustrating. But Mixtape, anyway, the video game, what do we think? Matt, how did you feel about Mixtape now having played it?
Yeah, I really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. It has big cinematic sort of like movie vibes to it. Like,
yes,
the people who made it, like, obviously big music fans, that's such a big focus of it. Clearly also big fans of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like, specifically. That feels like a really big inspiration here, along with a lot of other like coming of age films. I really enjoyed how they use the lens of music and like someone who is like absolutely obsessed with this stuff, to the point of being like borderline annoying, in that way that you have to be when you're a teenager and you like stuff, which I think is great. Like, I think we were all like obsessed with something at 18, right, where you not only liked it, but you were right about it, and other people were wrong about it if they had the wrong opinions, and you'd really fight your corner on stuff.
I feel like music is it's so taste driven, and yet when you lock into it, you feel like insane for people not liking the thing that you do. You're like, this is, how can you not understand the artistry at work here? You know, like I'm sitting here listening to Alter Bridge records and being like, man, why are these guys not the biggest thing in the world? They fucking make great music. So I totally relate to that, I think, in that kind of stage of my life where I was like very obsessed with certain bands and was like, I don't know, I was like, oh, well, just fucking regular shit on the radio sucks, you know, like this is what I really care about. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I thought it was a really by the end of it I was like, this is excellent. I think the only issue that I had was that it took a little bit of time to maybe find a bit of pace. Like, I think maybe for the first hour or so I had a bit of you know, the whole like Simpsons, like, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory? Like,
right, yeah.
The talk of this party. But then equally, I think that was like almost intentional for a game like this, because the idea is that like when you're a teenager, one day that has a big event at the end of it can just feel like it's stretching into infinity.
Yeah. And in a way they want it to, right? Like, this is the last day they're spending together as a group of friends, and there is that kind of melancholy to it at the end, you know. It's never going to be the same, because, you know, everyone leave school and they're like, oh, we'll keep in touch, you know, we'll be friends forever, blah blah blah, and you know, inevitably that stuff falls away and you never do, and then you see them at a reunion 20 years later and you're like, oh yeah, we should catch up sometime, and you say it knowing that you're never going to. But I think it's extremely relatable in that specific way, and so yeah, I definitely understand you know, that kind of feeling that they wanted to invoke through, you know, going to these memories basically and reliving everything. So I guess like mechanically the game is quite interesting because it takes a lot of different swings at like interactions essentially. Almost every piece of gameplay feels unique and as a part of it. And I kind of, not surprising, even though the game is only 3 hours long, why it took so long to make is because creating whole new gameplay mechanics for every single section is no mean feat. You know, it's, when people make games, there's a reason that they stick with one thing or two things, right? Is because it's very difficult to spin up something to a level of polish that is good enough to where people will be satisfied with it. It's what makes the Hazelight games so outstanding, is like the amount of variety they have, to not the most insane level of polish. You know, you're never going to get a Naughty Dog level of polish or a Nintendo level of polish out of a Hazelight game, but it's close enough to the point where you're like, you know what, I'll forgive them because they are doing so much stuff. And I would say the same is the case here, where it's like, wow, this is a really small team and they have been able to make really weird interactions. I mean, everyone talks about the tongue, right? The tongues like moving with each other, which is very fun and weird. The you know, skipping stones thing that I really enjoyed. There's quite a few different ones, and I think they all suit the mood and aesthetic that they're kind of going for in the moment, right? I think I really enjoyed the headbanging in the car, where it's just like cutting between different camera angles. And it's like you have that control over the beat of it and the rhythm, which I think is really nice. I've seen a lot of people say, like, I could get the same experience out of this game watching it. And, like, I understand where that comes from, right? And I think there's lots of bad faith people saying that. But I do think that you can't if you are involved in the music. Like, there is a way in which this game connects you to the music through the actions that you take, and the feeling of pressing the buttons in the moment is enough to kind of like give you more of a connection to it. So yeah, I think all that stuff is really interesting. I think overall for me, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well made. I enjoyed the characters and the interactions. I think I definitely preferred The Artful Escape more, and I think it's because the subject matter of that was just resonated a bit more strongly with me. I think it's, you know, the idea of like it's more of a person who is more on the creative side of the music versus Stacy, I think is her first name, right? Rockford, in this game, where she is a quote-unquote music supervisor, which means she's more obsessed with listening to and consuming and being a part of music as opposed to creating music necessarily. And so, yeah, being a bit more on a creative side, I felt like Artful Escape connected with me slightly more. But that's not to say that this wasn't effective. I think it was quite effective. I think the interesting part for me is like how how universal it seems to have been amongst critics in terms of their relatedness to it, I did think that there would be a little bit of a disconnect based on the specific American teenage experience, right? I don't know how you felt about this, but I know, Simon Cardy from IGN reviewed it for them, and he's based in the UK, right? And ostensibly would have not had that kind of upbringing in the same way that these kids did, and yet still very much connected with it. I think for me, I connected slightly less, and I think part of that is also, my friend group, there's me, Bally, and Ali T, we were, sitting inside EV training Pokemon at weekends, not going to parties, right? So it's an experience that I don't necessarily relate with from that age in particular. And I think that also creates a bit of a disconnect, because if you don't connect with it from like the experiential angle, then it's a little harder also to connect with it also from like the... from the cultural angle also. But yeah, I don't know how that like level of it worked for you.
Well, yeah, that's quite interesting actually, because I was sort of pulling double shift as a teenager. So I was in EV training on Pokemon Platinum during the day, but then also had like basically like 2 years from like 16 to 18 of like very frequent house parties, and the sort of like things where you'd be talking about it for like weeks afterwards, like, I don't know, so and so threw up in the fish tank at someone's house, and so I think there was a little bit more of it for me in this, where like I did get quite a lot of nostalgia for being like an idiot surrounded by idiots, and like adults being sort of like, don't be stupid, and you being like, oh, we're just getting drunk, it's fine, and the sort of doing the sort of stuff where like, I'm an adult now, if I saw teenagers doing that, I'd be like, this is dangerous, and you're doing something stupid, but at the time feeling like invincible and like best. So I think I connected quite heavily there, even if like the very Americanism of it, the idea that like they're going off to college to live by themselves soon and they can't go out for a beer is still like baffling to me as one of those like American things. Like, you can live by yourself for 3 years, but you can't drink during that time, like legally. Is so strange.
It's mad. Yeah, absolutely mad.
But yeah, so I think it does this sort of like almost like double hit of nostalgia, where like I think as someone from the UK, you don't get necessarily the Americana of it all, but if I got sort of like half of it on terms of like drinking as a teenager and the idea of like drama and the how big your feelings are at that point and how important everything feels, like the idea of like two like of your friends getting together being such a big deal and things like that, and I think it gets enough of that, and then also there is nostalgia from me for the films that it's riffing on at the same time, so it sort of does this. By their powers combined, I think by the end of it, it did have me thinking quite heavily. Like I basically spent like an hour thinking about when I was like 16, 17. Afterwards, because it does. I think you're right. It's a very American and like a very like white American experience.
Yes,
like that they're nailing down there. But it definitely hit me in a certain way, and yeah, just that. I mean. No, I'm skipping ahead there, so I won't go to the end of it straight away. But yeah, I don't know. I had a really nice time with it, and also, like, it was funny you said about the creative side of things as well, because I think I connected quite heavily with it. I wouldn't say that I'm not a creative person, but equally like the sort of like obsessive interest and like recall that Stacey has in that is something that I have always had. I mean, geez, I played through every Star Fox game recently, so I can tell you about every Star Fox game. Like, it's so I connected there quite heavily as well. And while I'm a bit less of a annoyance about it these days, like I like to play it for my own interest rather than so I can tell other people about it. I definitely felt in that sort of like 18-year-old character where it's like, yeah, I know all of this stuff about all of this thing, and I will connect it to you, and I will try and tell you about it. And if you go, oh no, if I think your opinion is wrong on that, then I'm going to judge you. Like I did, I did connect quite heavily with that.
No, that's a very good point. I think that's a similar thing for me as well, right? It's like that obsessive knowledge of a thing and like diving so deep into it that you like, yeah, you kind of feel like, oh yes, I just want to learn more and more about this, and yeah, get to that place with it. Yeah, well, I'm glad that we brought you here so that you can indulge and tell everybody about Star Fox. So yeah, definitely leaning into that side, which is great. Yeah, I very much enjoyed the kind of ride of it. I think from a pacing standpoint, it's really well put together. I feel like it's pulling at kind of like strings of things from like Life is Strange, where you're spending a lot of time in the bedrooms of these characters. I find it a really interesting kind of like creative choice to say, okay, you can actually not go downstairs here. And to me, that very much recalls like going to friends' houses and their bedroom being the place that I know the best, because that's where you spend all your time. That's where you're, playing Warhammer or like playing video games or doing whatever, right? And,
yeah,
there would be the times where, parents would be like, right, go outside, and then me and Bally would just get out lightsabers and be idiots and fight with lightsabers in the garden. But like, I think it's a really strong creative choice to say like, no, the thing that you know best about your friends' place of living is their own room, and how much time you spend in those rooms and the conversations you have there and the things that you do there. I thought was really interesting, because it's almost like, in 50 years time, when you're thinking back at your like childhood memories, what is the space that you're going to remember? And it's going to be that. And for a game that's so tied up with memory and nostalgia, I think it was very strong in that sense. And yeah, I think it's fun kind of like walking around those spaces and having that kind of be a catalogue of memories, right? Of like, this is the time we did this because this photo recalls that, or this guitar that I picked up from this place is related to this memory. And so I think structurally it works really nicely in that way to kind of thread everything together. Yeah, I'm interested from like a gameplay standpoint, were there any segments that stood out to you that you particularly enjoyed, either for narrative reasons or for just the engagement with it?
Yeah, I think two really stood out to me. One of them was again, very Ferris Bueller, the side-on, like, running through the gardens and the school and everything like that. Not necessarily because it was, like, mechanically amazing. Like, it felt quite nice to, like, slide and jump. I'm guessing that's the part of the game that's probably closest to their previous game, right? Like, it goes side-on.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it recalls Artful Escape in that moment. I feel like Artful Escape wasn't necessarily giving you platforming challenges ever. It was, yeah, you could jump and you could like knee slide, but it was more about the expressivity of those movements as opposed to any particular challenge that they had laid in front of you. And so I would say that in many ways this section is actually more gamey than the Artful Escape's presentation in any way. So yeah.
But yeah, I thought, I can't remember exactly what track it was against, but I thought the music for it was fantastic. And this is a slightly weird thing, but like, it was so long and it went through so many different areas and like turned the camera through all these areas that it actually did a really good job at turning what had been a like quite stationary, like a town where you were just in one spot at one point, right? Like, and then you would shift to another space. And like, it really did a good job actually of being like, no, this is this fucking small town, and like it really fleshed out the world in the same way I guess like the skateboarding sections do and stuff like that.
Yes, and the shopping cart segment as well.
Yeah,
which like when you play those, you're like, wow, they had to make a lot of assets for this stuff that goes by super quickly.
I think that's it. I think it's like it's impressive almost in the scale of it, even though it's not that big. Like it suddenly you go, they've had to model this entire town, or at least like the bit that you're going through. And it felt big and impressive. So I really like that. I also absolutely loved the camcorder section.
Oh,
just because like it just looks so good. Like, there's no way that you can control that doesn't look like you're watching an old recording. Like, you just get the weird sort of like bubble and shift and focus of it all, and like the slight zoom and zoom out going on all the time, like recording a guy about to jump off the roof into like a paddling pool.
Yes,
like,
I actually messed that up because I clicked that interaction from behind him on the porch and I couldn't get around there in time to actually see him go in. So that was unfortunate. But yes, I agree with you on that section generally, just in terms of the accuracy with which it is recreated. Oftentimes in games, right, you'll have these like CRT filters and that sort of stuff, and I always find them just never really that effective. I find that they're not really accurate and they don't really work because I don't know. There's something about trying to recreate that experience on a modern television that is just never really going to happen. But in this specific way, because of the bending of like the view and the particular lens they're showing it with, it feels so correct. And I think also because of the art style they have chosen, there is a way in which it feels more real than the rest of the game.
Agreed.
Which I thought was really interesting. And yeah, I like that you can just like come up to people and, you know, high five them or like do interactions and all that sort of stuff.
The high five, for example, it's a trick. The game is playing a trick on you because it's making you get in way too close to people with the camcorder, which is a thing that people used to do when they had a camcorder on them, but you probably wouldn't do as a player by accident. Like you wouldn't choose to like go in too close on someone's face, but they give you the high five. You have to get really close to do the high five, and it means that you have footage that it looks bad because you've gone right up to someone's face, like half of their face in the frame, to do the high five. And it's just I don't know. It's really small little things that I think lends it an authenticity for the time and the feeling of that sort of time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really well executed. I think for me, kind of one of the standout moments is just like commanding fireworks. Like I really like when you have control over that stuff, even though it doesn't really mean anything necessarily, but it's just like the level of control you have to decide like when this stuff happens with the music in time with it, I think is just very satisfying. Those more subtle moments with the headbanging as well, and that I think were they're things that are, you could say, like not necessary, but I think they embed you more within it and make you feel a bit more connected. So
well, it comes back round to that the thing you were saying earlier of people being like, I don't need to play this or press the buttons, right? Like I could just watch it, and it's like, well, no, it's not a film. It simply is not a film, right? Like it has all these interactive moments for a reason, and if you engage with it at its level, you get out of it what you put in. To that extent, like if you don't care about when the fireworks go off and you just press the button as fast as you can, like you're not going to have as good a time as if you conduct it, which is obviously what you're meant to do.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Or I don't know. There's even like comedy to it where like in the headbanging sequence they're gonna get fast food and I'm just smashing the button because she keeps saying hamburger like in really funny ways. You know, like there's a comedy to it that also like can come through the experience. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot. From like a character perspective, was there any of the three that kind of connected with you more that you thought? Because for me, I felt like Cass probably got the most development overall in terms of like her story and the kind of like familial relationship there and everything going on. But yeah, interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think in terms of like who I enjoyed the most, I think seeing Cass's story was the one I was most interested in. In that sense, it felt like the one that had to have a resolution, because like it couldn't end where it was. Things were getting tenser. Things were gonna blow up, and you know, to an extent, that's exactly what happens.
I mean, the moment when it does blow up, I think is a really great, like really well framed moment with the cut-ins and the zoom and the fire and all that sort of stuff. I think it's really well put together.
Yeah, and I think it's the whole game has these sort of like surrealist moments, right? And most of them are visually. Like they are taking a feeling and an emotion and they blow them out into some sort of like visual surrealism. But I think in that leans more into the vocal surrealism. Like that's the lines that she's saying is not what she would have said. Like it's not how she would have spoken to her dad in the moment. It's this like very cool exaggeration of the moment because things have gotten that big that she has to react that big. So I thought that was really excellent, and I think in terms of like direct connection, it's probably Stacey for me. It's just the character that I think was most where I was at. I did really enjoy Slater. There's one moment. What was when you're at his house? I think you know that Cass is quite different early on. So like when you go to her room and it's all pristine and pink and stuff like that, you're like
decorated by her mother, basically.
You're like, it didn't necessarily surprise me. I went, oh yeah, that's interesting. But then even seeing the difference between Slater and Stacey, I'm like, oh okay, he's even more on this side. And then when you've obviously spent this entire time like trying to get booze for the party, right? Like it's a big deal. And then his mum calls up asking if they want margaritas, and he's like, "No, it's weird that you ask my friends if they want drinks, mum."
Yeah.
And it's like, this so funny, and it's so that real thing of being like, we need booze for tonight. It's such an important thing. I'm not taking it off my mum, who is like offering it to me though. That's not cool. Like it's just
they have to earn it, right?
Yeah, it's a real funny like teenage juxtaposition there. I enjoyed him, but I think almost by the nature of what the story had to be, which was Cass, having her moment, and Stacey being this intense person who had to learn to not have everything planned and to sort of like roll with the punches to a certain extent. Slater ends up being a bit of a middle ground between them, and he didn't get a ton of development himself. But then again, not everyone gets a story, right? Some people,
no, totally.
Like the way he was talking sounded like he might just hang around in town, and that sort of feels like where he might end up in 5 years. He might just be working at a shop in town while everyone else is doing their thing.
I think so. Yeah, I think there's definitely moments where they give because Cass comes into the friendship like later, so Slater and Rockford have kind of like grown up together. I do think one of the actual more because there's a lot of technically impressive stuff in this game. First of all, it looks fucking gorgeous. It's a really stunning game. But the moment in the photo booth where you're taking the photos together with those two,
so good.
Like the way that the character models collide, I'm like, this is kind of crazy from a technical standpoint. Like it's very, very impressive. And yeah, I thought that's kind of like the one kind of like insight into their kind of past that you get, which I thought was quite nice. So yeah, very, very good.
Yeah, which was like, again, I don't know if you got this. I got a hint that like, not that there had been anything romantic between them, but like that something had always been bubbling under the surface, but just never went any further.
Yeah, I definitely got that sense from it for sure. I think there's like a weird scene with like a seashell right after that.
Yes.
And I was like, is there a shadow of two of them? Yeah. So I think, there's something there, but I think it's subtle enough to where it kind of leaves it up to your own interpretation, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think it's actually like bravely subtle, if that makes sense. Like I think it would be so easy to have lent into that in a much more obvious way, and I liked the fact that it just never gets resolved. And again, everything that I'm praising here, it comes down to like, it feels very teenage. Like I think they've captured a lot of that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't personally. I think the songs are great. It's not my taste in music, but I think what they chose was great for the game. So I think that's another kind of point in Artful Escape's favor for me is more that the actual music of that game was a bit more my speed versus this, which I enjoy. I thought it was good, but I think that also is probably why it wasn't like fully in my wheelhouse. But I think for the type of game they were making and what they wanted to do, I thought it was very well put together, basically, in terms of the choices and how they all match with each moment. So yeah, overall, very much enjoyed it. The internet does not enjoy it, apparently. I don't want to talk about this too much, but I don't know. What are your feelings on like why this has become such a kind of like a point of contention? I don't know, a thing that people are railing against and getting mad about? Because there are lots of video games like this that exist these days. Is it just this vendetta against traditional games media and being like, why did you give this a 10 out of 10 and not Crimson Desert type of thing, like does it really just boil down to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the very, very short answer is grifters.
Yes.
Which just does not need expanding on in any way, like people who are... But I think widely, and the reason I think it's been able to spread, because I think the sort of people who do this stuff in bad faith will have attacked more games than Mixtape in the past 6 months that we just never would have heard about because it doesn't spell out. Like, I think this happens more often than most people know, and most of the time it doesn't leave that bubble because people don't care. But I think there is a distinct misunderstanding these days about what games journalism is, what IGN is as a company, because, like, that's just... This doesn't happen if... Not to the same extent if, like, Eurogamer gives a score to something. Like, it might kick off...
And IGN 10 is different from Eurogamer recommended.
Yeah, and, like, I think IGN is just... Even people who don't pay attention to stuff all the time, IGN is the one where occasionally they'll pop up and they'll be like, oh, that's a weird thing. And then, yeah, there's just this weird thing these days. People have a lot of agendas for games they want to do well and don't want to do well. Yeah. I think weirdly Mixtape's gotten mixed in with Crimson Desert for one.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of talk about Stellar Blade as well, which, you know, is a much older
the ultimate
game,
grifter game, Stellar Blade.
Just this sort of like comparison of scores and being like, well, how can you say this is better than this because of this?
Yeah.
And just...
It's such an age-old argument that people just have not understood for so many years, right? And it is incredibly frustrating when it's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't... First of all, it's different people reviewing these games. Get that through your fucking head, you know?
Yeah,
I think there's still the lack of understanding that IGN isn't like I mean, it is a corporate entity, let's be clear, but like the people writing the reviews are different people with different opinions, you know? Like it's I don't know, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, they have actual editorial freedom. Like they're a big corporate entity, but the editorial side isn't. I think that's the thing. At that point they're just people writing about games they like. Exactly. I think one thing that happened with Mixtape, and I think this is that IGN wasn't the only really high score, right? And we saw it because in the Fantasy Critic channel on the podcast Discord, we get shown when a score comes up for a game that's been picked. And
yeah, I was in the office at work and I said, holy shit, out loud when I saw it, because it's so high.
It came out with like a 96, right? Which is basically
96. I was like, that's the highest reviewed score of all time, basically.
Yeah. And I think since then it's come down to like 89 or 88 or maybe even lower than that. Like it's evened out. But I think people see these high scores immediately and they just go, well, what the hell's happening here? And seeing no difference in scores, no outliers, and being like, well, there's something going on here. And like, people are so... I say people. The internet is incredibly like conspiratorial these days. Like, conspiracy theories are such a big deal. And like, having obviously worked in games journalism myself and now working on the PR side, like, I've seen every side of it. Like, shit just isn't getting paid for unless it's declared. And like, so people like, you know, shouting about paid for reviews for Mixtape and stuff like that. And it's just a misunderstanding that the people who would have requested code early for Mixtape, because it's not the biggest game in the world, will have literally been the people most excited for it, which is the people that have seen trailers for it and vibed with it, which means they're more likely to give it a higher score because they are already on board. Like, that's just what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it goes into a wider discussion of like, oh, why is review scores always so high? It's like, well, we only review games that are worth reviewing these days, because it's not like the old days where you review every fucking GBA licensed game that exists. There's just simply too many video games to cover, and so the ones that do get reviews are ones that are going to be some level of good, right? It's a very frustrating landscape to exist in, and do feel
it was just baffling, wasn't it, as well? Like I had this thing where I was like, and also I played and finished Mixtape last night, and that was mostly because this was coming up, and I was like, I do want to play it for the podcast. Genuinely, the chat around it had been so toxic that it put me off playing it, because I didn't want to be reminded about all the other stuff that was being chatted about.
Very fair. Yeah, it's not great, but the game's great, so
the game's really
go
good.
Play it. So go and enjoy it, and I'm sure that we'll get Bally's thoughts on it when he returns, because I know that he was very much interested in checking this out also. So, yeah, great. Let's move on to another video game, Matt, that you've come in with and decided is an interesting game that is bubbling to the surface that maybe people have not heard of yet. So do you want to talk about Black Jacket? Yeah,
so Black Jacket is ostensibly Balatro, but blackjack rather than poker. Which
to some degree has already existed. There's a game that came out around when Balatro released, which is called Dungeons and Degenerate Gamblers.
Yes.
That actually was on the internet before Balatro was on Steam, and existed before it, and then people were like, oh, you're just copying it, and it's like, no, actually it wasn't. But that is interesting that it's another kind of blackjack take on it, because it's not been done, but it's like that's quite a different game, I would say, in a lot of senses.
I'd say so. I've because I've been having to do a bit of research for work for a game that we're working on, and this came up, and Dungeons and Degenerate Gamblers, which is such a difficult name to say out loud.
It is, yeah.
Blackjack is leaning into the vibe that I think a lot of gambling roguelikes are these days, which is like the not quite horror vibe, but like hellish vibe, you know, which is a thing like the devil plays a big part in a lot of these things. It makes sense with the historical ideas of gambling, right? And
interesting, yeah.
In
Forbidden Solitaire just came out as well, which is another almost Inscription adjacent take on a card game. So I feel like that theme kind of goes with the territory to some degree, so I understand why people are leaning into it.
Yeah, 100%. This has a bit of Inscription about it as well, I would say. And you're playing as someone who is trying to get enough coins to pay the ferryman to get out of the underworld, basically. And you are unnamed, and you meet a bunch of people that you're playing against along the way who all seem to know who you are, even though you don't know who you are. And as you play and as you win blackjack hands against them, you get more of your history given to you, as all of these people seem to be like a little bit like mad or upset with you. And so it has this like meta narrative going along each run, which adds to the idea of like you're not just playing necessarily for the sake of playing. You get a little bit of story each time, which, you know, it's the Hades route, right? But like it's working for me so far. It's mysterious. There's really good voice acting in it so far, which I've been enjoying a lot. Like one of those, for a game that I hadn't really heard about until a couple of days ago, the production values are really high. All the effects on like the cards and things like that, like and like, so for anyone who's not played blackjack, it is as simple as getting 21 on your cards, and you're playing against a dealer who is trying to get 21 as well. If you get higher than 21, you go bust and you lose the money that you wagered, or if the dealer gets higher than you, you lose as well. And blackjack is when you get an ace and like a 10 or an ace and a jack or an ace and a queen, like. And this plays with that, but the way it plays with it really well, which I really like, is that in blackjack you just get given your cards. It doesn't matter what order they're in or where they are. In blackjack, you have 5 spaces on your side of the blackjack table, and your opponent has 5 spaces on their side. And as you deal cards into those spaces, they can have effects on them which affect cards either around them or directly opposite them on the opponent's side. So some like card effects are like you can drain their cards. So if they've got like a 7 on their side, you can put down a 4 on your side, which drains their 7 and turns your into an 11 and turns their 1 to a 0. So they've now got a whole space which is just worth 0 that they can't put any more cards on. You can get transparent cards, which means you can put another card on top of them. You can get negative cards. So like if you've gone bust, you can keep drawing cards until you get a negative. You've got a sleeve that you can hide cards up for like a certain cost as well. So if you get like an ace, you can literally put an ace up your sleeve and save that for the next time you get a 10. So you've got blackjack. And there's the more you play, the more effects come into play. There are like 5 decks that are locked. So each suit of cards, you got the 4 main suits, have like different types of effects. So some of them deal cards into your opponent's deck, which make their deck worse. Some of them will like let you see the top 3 cards of your deck and like rearrange them for like drawing the next card. It's got so many cool interactions, and you get more and more. So like there are fire cards which I've not unlocked yet, but I've played against, that will literally like burn your cards on your side, and that means that you cannot play them for the rest of the time that you're playing that opponent. And one very, very cool thing that, like, the first time it happened, they hinted at it with in the intro, like the tutorial. The narrator talking to you at the tutorial hinted at it. If you get 2 face cards, so say a jack and a queen, or a queen and a king, or a jack and a king, they have little things on them which like give a descriptor to that card. So like the jack, it says that he is not happy with his place in life and will do anything to change it. And the queen one is that she loves her king. If you put a jack and a king next to each other, which come up quite rarely, so it's like it's a fun interaction, the jack will kill the king card. The jack becomes the murderer card, and the king gets a additional ability to be transparent and either be worth 10 or worth 0 because he's been killed. And then if you put the queen next to the jack when the jack is a murderer, which it means you've held the jack for your entire run after this murderer and you get to put it next to the queen, he gets hanged, and that gives him a whole other ability of cards. So you've got all these very cool interactions that you need to... So sometimes you might want to put a face card up your sleeve early in a run to make sure you get to put it against another one of the face cards to make their interaction work to get a better card out of it. It is hard to put down.
The things that I think make good roguelikes work are those emergent synergies, right? The things that you don't expect to happen, but as a consequence of the build that you have spec'd into, create magic almost. I think that's kind of like the best roguelikes end up doing that. And it feels like this has such a possibility space that those moments are emerging relatively frequently. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, 100%. My literal... Because Balatro is such a big point of comparison, I mean, obviously I know that you have a bias here.
A little bit, yeah.
I don't think I've played any game that does what you described as well as Balatro, because I think it escalates the possibility space so quickly in terms of like you get new cards and new abilities and new jokers on such a frequent rapid basis in Balatro that like you hit that point where you start to see how everything can interact so quickly, and like you can build up those big almost broken multipliers so quickly that it makes it like you're like, I would need to try this again because there's so many options. Blackjack, it has been a bit slightly slower in terms of how often it's willing to dull out these different things, so I can see the possibilities of like very good decks that I can make with synergies, but it's been harder and slower to get there so far than in something like Balatro.
Yeah, I think it's a very hard comparison point, I think, just because there's also a simplicity in Balatro's design, and there is a deliberateness in the way that Local Thunk design jokers in particular is very deliberate in that they only affect specific things so that there is a very open synergistic possibility space. And all of the cards, by his own admission, he doesn't like reading long descriptions. I think where a lot of roguelikes fall down is they have a description that is 3 sentences long. And it's like, if this triggers a thing, then the 4th thing on your thing will do this. And it's like, you will never see that in Balatro because it is so like tightly kind of worded and designed down to that point, which allows those emergent synergies to happen so frequently. And it's very difficult to design something as streamlined as that. And so I think that's why a lot of these games mimicking like the ideas of it are not able to fully get there, is because that particular part of the design is very difficult to make great. So yeah, but this sounds really good. I think I'm also interested. It does feel like there's this kind of like back and forth in a similar way to how Inscriptions kind of dice like put you ahead and then behind, and then you have to like kind of balance the scales essentially. So you're in a place of like, oh, I don't have 21 yet, but I can use this card. It'll fuck them up, and now I will get it. Like, how many cards are you playing to get to that point? Is it like, do you play things out on a turn-by-turn basis until someone hits it, or how does that kind of like function? Yeah,
so it's literally you take it in turns. So the opponent puts a card down first, and then you put a card down, and it goes back and forward like that. Which, right. Yeah, 100% has that thing.
But does it just stop when someone hits 21? Or is it like, okay, this person's hit 21, and then you have to keep doing it until the end of the round, essentially?
Yeah, you have to say stop. And they obviously they must have some sort of AI which will like, it will stop on like maybe like an 18 or a 19 sometimes. And sometimes it will like keep going. It seems to have a pretty good grasp on like when it's too risky. So sometimes you can just win it because the AI goes, 18 is too high risk, and I'm going to stop there. And like it, even though you're on, but if you're already higher than them, they will keep going. But it's not even as simple as like you can get like blackjack, which is it's 21 but higher. It's like a natural 20 in D&D. Like,
okay,
it's
right.
Even if the other person got 20, like a natural 20 beats it. In this, like blackjack beats 21, gotten in a different way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
even then, the opponent could put down a card opposite your ace, for example, that is like the opposite card to this loses 2, and suddenly your ace has gone down to a 9, and you're like, oh, this is not blackjack anymore, I now need to keep playing. And there's one, like, each of the big bosses at the end of a section of a run have unique abilities. One of them is like a kid, and he has what they call train cards. So if you picture, you've got 5 spaces on the opponent's side and 5 spaces on your side. His train cards basically treat those spaces like a track, like a circle, and they can rotate cards like 3 left. So if you've got, it can basically rotate cards from your side onto their side as well. So the possibility space for like where things could end, it means that you're never certain where things are going to land, and you're never like either like, oh, I can't win this hand, or they can't win this hand. Like, it's up in the air right until the end, and once you realise how things can change, you suddenly like, well, if I buy cards in the shop now that can either be a 4 or a 0, which is you're like, I can put that down, I can get up to 21. Say I was on a 17, I can get up to 21, but if they mess around with my cards, that 4 can turn into a 0 if they like increase the value of my cards to maybe bust. So you start seeing value in those sort of cards. You start seeing the value in negative cards. They're like, and like I've played, I'd say I played like 3, maybe 4 hours of this tops, and maybe like 7 or 8 runs. So I've not like dived into it to the fullest extent, but I can just see there is like a bottomless pit there waiting for me, which is concerning. I've got so much like story to find out still as well. Like,
interesting. Okay.
Each of the bosses has maybe like 8 or 9 icons underneath them when you beat them, and I'm maybe like 3 in, and each icon is a cutscene giving you a little bit more history and story.
So it's like Hades style narrative with the bosses as you face them, essentially.
Yeah, and they'll sort of like taunt you and talk to you, and some of them will be like, I can't believe you're back here, but none of this is given any context, so you still don't know like necessarily who you are to these people, especially like in the underworld. Did you know them before life? I don't know. It's the first time in ages I played a game that I was not aware of. I mean, like, really shocked at its quality. The tone of it, I would say as well, like, it's not horror. It reminds me of like Dredge. Like, it's unsettling, and the voice acting is probably at like the same sort of level. Like, it has.
So Bally will be fine with it then. It won't.
100%. Like, I think you'd both get along with it really well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have it because they could you believe it? They want us to do a bundle with us, so we have a bundle on Steam. So if you do want to pick up Blackjack and you own Balatro, then you can get it for a cheaper price. But yeah, I do have a code for this, so I might dive in after your strong recommendation. That sounds great. Very, very interesting. So yeah, good to surface some hidden gems out there. I will now surface another hidden gem. I don't know if it's a hidden gem, to be honest. It's done quite well for itself. There's a game called Motorslice that currently is not available on Switch 2. I imagine it will become available at some point in time. Seems like the sort of game that just needs, I don't know, Nintendo to give people dev kits maybe so they can put their indie games onto the platform. So Motorslice is, I would call it like a blend between Mirror's Edge, Shadow of the Colossus, and I don't know, like, yeah, it's very hard to describe. It is a parkour platforming game, 3D platformer in essence. You play this slicer, whose name her name is P. Yeah, There's a part of like this game and its audience, that and the developer, I think, that comes from like the horny side of Steam, where, you know, just a little bit. And I think that there's definitely, we can get into this later, but there's definitely parts of this game where I'm like, what the fuck are we doing, you know? But her name is P, and one of the reviews, the title was Thighs of P, which I found quite funny, if I'm honest. There's not too many reviews on YouTube, but I think that was one of them. And yeah, you're the slicer, so you basically have a chainsaw, and your chainsaw is used to attack enemies, and in this case they're kind of like robotic like forklift machines who run at you, and there's also these kind of like flying enemies that throw like chainsaws at you, so you can defeat them. But more importantly, it's kind of used in platforming, where if you are on a certain like yellow surface that is very obviously signaled throughout the game, you can put your chainsaw in it and you can basically slice across it and travel horizontally and vertically across these surfaces. And so you are basically navigating this world, which is full of swinging, bars and cracks in walls that you can slide along, and walls that you can wall run up and jump off of and do wall jumps between, and like jumps down to areas where you're trying to land safely. There's a tuck and roll, which is kind of where the Mirror's Edge comparison comes in, because in that game, obviously, you had the kind of like first-person rolling animation in order to not take damage when you like fell from a specific height. And in this game, it's a similar thing where you could fall from a height and splat yourself, but if you are doing the tuck and roll, then you're able to not only get further distance traveling, but also not die as a consequence. There's a lot of dying in this game. I definitely fell down quite a few times. Yeah, I picked it up just on a whim, really, and I was like, I kind of like the look of this thing, and I like, parkour and stuff. And the first enemy I encountered to do the combat with, I was like, oof, this is a bit rough and janky. The combat side of it, I don't think feels particularly great, and I think is there almost as a pace breaker to some degree. There are rooms you'll enter where it'll be like, oh, you have to clear 5 of the enemies before you can exit this place. And I think that is there so that the whole game isn't just back-to-back, wall-to-wall platforming, because I think it could get tiresome if that was the case. And so I think, the combat hasn't been a consideration really, and it's only there in kind of like a way to break things up, essentially. Because it's like, okay, you can hit these guys and like they rebound, and you have like a lock on and you can dodge out of the way, and then the floating enemies, the ones that shoot chain blades at you, you have to basically parry them by when the chain comes to, or when the blade comes to you, you hit it once, like knock it in the air, and you hit it a second time and it pings it right back at them to take them out, essentially. So you're basically shooting their projectiles back at them, but the timing on it can be really hard because you can be moving in a space and trying to get your lock on ready, and by the time you do that, the blade has shot and you're already dead and your character's chopped in half. So yeah, I think some of that stuff can feel a little finicky, and I don't know, I think some elements of this, I think if you are someone who isn't really into platforming and movement and momentum, I think you probably won't get on great with this game. It feels more in the range of like a 6 out of 10. But if you like that stuff, I think even though it has its less polished parts, it just feels really good once you have that momentum to move through the world of chaining together a wall run into a, jump on a pole, into a, back-to-back wall jump, and then like hovering over this area where you need to, there's another thing later in the game where you get this button you can press that like pushes the wall out while you're moving, and so you're creating platforms as you're wall running, jumping between things, and it gets quite complex. So some of those endgame platforming sequences really feel like calibrated for someone who is quite deep into this genre space, and this is main path stuff. It's critical path that you have to do. There's obviously a lot of like side stuff as well. You can find these orbs that you can collect by doing like little platforming. They almost feel like the strawberries in Celeste to some degree, where it's like go off the beaten path, do this harder challenge, bring this orb back to this space, and then it's just a collectible. It doesn't really do anything. So yeah, and as you're basically climbing up this mega structure, and so throughout the whole world you are seeing where you're headed towards, essentially. There are, between each section, there's 8 chapters total, and between each chapter there's this huge, long, like, bridge, essentially. Giant stretch of space, and it's really satisfying because you take your chainsaw and you basically stick it into the wall and you just glide all the way along the side of the bridge, basically, to get there. And you see the distance and the view in the distance before you to show the next place you're going to go. And like 3 chapters away from the end, I like looked at the top and I was like, oh wow, I can physically see the bridges that will connect me to that final spot at the very top of this kind of tower area. And the ending is quite cool as well, the way that it kind of reveals, what is at the top and what's going on. So yeah, I definitely was kind of satisfied with that. But I think the bosses are really interesting because, like I said, there is a Shadow of the Colossus feeling here where they are these enormous, giant, like, mechanical things. A lot of them are based on, I don't know, like, things you would see at a building site, essentially. So, like, here's a giant crane that is the boss, and to destroy it, you have to, chainsaw through those kind of yellow panels as you're going up, and the health bar is broken up into, like, 7 or 8 different pieces, and those all indicate different parts of the machine that you are destroying. So as you go through, you're killing this bit and you're destroying this bit, and you're going higher and higher, and eventually you'll do the final blow at the end, and a big cutscene will happen, and the thing will kind of fall down and get covered in sand, and it will open up your path to the next area, basically. And I found those pretty satisfying. There are checkpoints if you want them, so you can turn on boss checkpoints. I very much did that because it's a game where you die in one hit. So if you are on this boss and you're like on the last bit and you fuck up a jump and you fall to the ground and splat, you have to start the whole thing again. But they have an option. I think it's by default boss checkpoints. So you can't really control when the boss checkpoint is, but they are generally quite good, I would say. There was only one where I found it what was a bit messed up because I had done it in a weird order, and then I was trying to trigger something for the boss to do, but it wasn't doing it because it didn't think I should be down on the floor at that stage in time. It thought I should be up somewhere else. So I had to like restart that boss fully to then kind of re-trigger it. But aside from that, I really enjoyed all of those, and they were very fun, like puzzle challenges as well as platforming, because part of the challenge is like, how do I get onto this thing in the first place, right? What is the thing I need to do to trigger it to like come down to me and for me to be able to like clamber up initially. So yeah, some fun kind of Shadow Colossus stuff in there, and just like the scale and spectacle. Like I was really surprised by how impressive like these things were from like a just scale standpoint and visual standpoint. I think the game is very nice looking. Generally speaking, it has a almost PS1 aesthetic, a little bit further than that, you might say Dreamcast to some degree. The character model is definitely a bit more advanced than that generation, or like the PlayStation generation, I would say. So yeah, it feels nice and cool to explore in that sense.
Nice. I do really like that. I think that seems to be happening in a lot of like indie games that are only out on Steam. Is this genre of like indie games with like a PlayStation or Dreamcast sort of visual style, where they, because it's sort of lo-fi, low tech, they've gone, let's make this huge and like these overwhelmingly large spaces that make you feel really small and industrial. Like what you described, I feel like I've seen in like 3 or 4 other like games of that style.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing because it's something that can't necessarily be done in like the high fidelity space in quite the same way.
No, because it costs too much, right? Especially at this scale to do it.
But yeah, I also, I don't know, I was only getting this, maybe it's just the fighting like cranes thing, but like I was getting like Nier Automata vibes from what you were saying as well.
Yes, there is a bit of that for sure in the aesthetic. I definitely feel that, and maybe this is where we talk about the horny, because that's part of that game as well. Is there is yeah, so like there are these little, so your character you actually play as the camera, which is a very like N64 thing to do as well. Of like,
fucking Lakitu, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so you are Orby, who is an orb that follows behind the back of the character. And there's a cool mechanic where actually, because of the sand and the dust, the screen gets like kind of covered in that stuff, and you can click in the left stick or the right stick, and it basically clears off your lens, basically. So you're like,
that's cool.
Your camera is kind of an active participant in this. But as you are going, traveling between these platforming areas and going between these spaces, there are moments where it'll be like slack off, so you can like chill for a bit and like get a little bit of a dialogue sequence in a cutscene. The voice actor is Kira Buckland, who I know has been in a lot of different anime and games and stuff, so she's quite well known. But these sequences are often focused on like camera angles that are not the best, and certain things of like, there's a moment where she takes off her shoes because it's sweaty and hot out there, and she puts her feet out into the distance, and the camera's like zooming on her feet real close, and you get dialogue choices in this moment, and one of the dialogue choices is sniff sniff, and I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? It's really, yeah. So there's a lot of that stuff, like it's a lot of like horny dialogue responses, but the character, I believe, can't actually understand what you're saying because you're an orb and you only like speak in bleeps and bloops, so you're doing these responses as a player character, but the character I don't think actually knows what's going on. But the game is treating her like a, I don't know, it's not great, I would say, in that aspect. It's not egregious, but it's just, it's a thing to be aware of with this game and what it's doing, basically.
There's a level of stuff like that, right, where like you're like, I don't want to be playing this and for then someone to walk in.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's not so egregious that like it's putting me off playing it necessarily, but if someone was to walk in, I would have to quickly be like, no. This is not what it's a platform. It's a movie boy game. I've got to play the movie boy game.
It's a very movie boy game. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was there for the whole time. So, these scenes, they are very short, and they don't really, I mean, there's no story to speak of. The story is really about you getting to the top and seeing what's there. And ultimately, they feel like kind of slice of life moments, almost like the sort of thing you would find in a Persona game to some degree, if those conversations were much more poorly written, essentially. So I think it's a little bit of a black mark against it, but I think the rest of it is, if you enjoy this type of 3D platformer, then I think I'd quite strongly recommend it, just because I feel like stuff exactly like this doesn't really exist. Like, this is so, when I say parkour, it's about like the jumping up to a ledge type deal and like chaining wall runs together. And yeah, I feel like there's lots of 3D platformers out there, like you have mentioned, but I feel so many of them fall into the Banjo-Kazooie mold, which is to say more collectathon than actually focused on the act of platforming and moving. And I have never connected with those platformers so much as I've connected with games where movement is the thing that you're doing and you're having challenges around. And so I'm glad that this exists, because there just is not that many games doing what this game is doing, where it is so movement challenge focused. So yeah, definitely a cool thing. It feels like the 3D platformer for 2D platformer lovers to some degree, and you'll definitely find some jank in there, but I think it's well done enough to where you can kind of get over it and get through it. So yeah, I do hope this comes to Switch 2, because I think it'd be a really good addition for that player base, and particularly the types of games that people like playing on Switch 2. So yeah, good recommendation.
Is it better or worse than Meat Boy 3D?
I like it more than Meat Boy 3D. Yeah, this would definitely be higher on my list this year than Meat Boy 3D for sure.
Nice.
I think it's just more involved and more interesting, generally speaking. And yeah, I very much enjoyed it. So yeah, that is Motorslice. Great. We are going to take a break now, because we've talked about lots of video games. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about Star Fox 2026 and what that means for the future of Nintendo and everything. So we'll see you in a sec. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time to talk about a video game that Nintendo just decided to tell us about 10 minutes before they announced it. Where were you when this happened? We all remember the day that Star Fox Direct got announced and what we were doing, what was going on. What was your situation, Matt, when you discovered Nintendo were effectively shadow dropping a Direct?
I think I was in bed. I think I was in bed having just literally like having a conversation with my wife, and then I saw the Discord message pop up from someone in the Discord being like, like red alert, Star Fox in like 7 minutes, and it was like, oh shit! I was like, there's a Nintendo Direct in like 7 minutes. I think I'm gonna watch that. She's like, yeah, fine. I'll read my book, and I was like, cool,
right.
Star Fox is happening, which obviously and she was like, so this is why you've been playing all the Star Fox games. I was like, yes.
Yeah. The inevitable end point of your obsession, yeah.
Which, speaking of, right, this had been rumoured ahead of time by the ever reliable Nate the Hate.
Backed up by VGC, of course, which gave it more legitimacy, but pretty good track record, generally speaking.
Pretty good track record, to the point where it feels, when they announced it like 5 minutes before, like 10 p.m. in the UK time, whatever, feels like they were like, we're not announcing this in April. We need him to be wrong about this.
Right. Gotta disprove the credibility to some degree. Yeah, that's very, very funny. I wonder if Nintendo have those conversations internally about the leakers and what's going on with them. You know, it'd be great to be a fly on the wall for that sort of stuff. So, but I mean, I was in my gacha hellhole, just playing, I think, Wuthering Waves at the time, and I was like just checking social media briefly, and I only got onto it about 5 minutes into the presentation, so I like opened it up and was like, what is happening now? What the fuck is going on? And then I immediately like closed down the game, opened up YouTube, put it on, and started watching from the halfway point. And actually I saw it was midway, and I just rewound to the beginning. I was like, okay, I don't know what is going on here. And so then kind of watched the whole thing through from that point. This is I don't know. We've talked about this a little bit on the side, but like, could you imagine that they would yet again remake Star Fox 64? It feels like a parody, but it also feels like the most Nintendo decision of all time. There is something about this announcement that is simultaneously the most Nintendo thing of all time, and also the least Nintendo thing of all time when it comes to what the focus of this remake is, which is, on a bullet point, visual fidelity, narrative, having a design aesthetic that leans realistic as opposed to stylized. Lots of stuff to dig into. Matt, what are your feelings on as your now deleted Blue Sky post said, the 5th version of Star Fox 64?
Yeah, I made a post saying that and got called out by a lot of people, because I was being like fairly flippant, because like Star Fox 64 was a reimagining of the SNES game, and Star Fox Zero was a reimagining of 64 in terms of like retelling the story, even if it was a different game. But it is still like, we keep going back to being like, Andros is attacking Corneria, and not in a sort of like Bowser with Mario, he's doing it again sort of way. It's just every time it's like, this is the first time this has happened. Andros is attacking Corneria. We're doing that again. I don't know. I was really hoping. I keep thinking we're in the Switch generation still, and we're not. We're in the Switch 2 generation. The Switch generation was this magical generation where games could get this new lease on life, right? You got like this incredible new Zelda games, incredible new Mario games that were so different to like the ones that come before, and that like reimagined the series in certain ways. I think I always hoped that Star Fox would be getting one of those as well. Like, even if they rebooted it again to be like, this is now the beginning of the story, whatever, I was hoping they would do something a little bit different with it, add something to the gameplay, expand it a little bit. As someone who wasn't a big Star Fox fan until recently, someone who was a sort of casual fan who'd played some of the games, I was just hoping to see something new that would make me excited to buy it. And as interesting as this is, like you say, with like the visual style change and the fidelity, it doesn't really excite me, because we have had, even if you don't include like some of the games, we have had a lot of Star Fox 64. Like, a lot of Star Fox 64 at this point. So to play it again doesn't make me hugely excited. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to play it because I think it's going to look...
Of course, yes.
I think it's going to look crazy good on Switch 2. I think it might be the best looking game they've done so far, because it's a on-rail shooter for a lot of it, right? They can control all the camera angles and things like that. It feels like it's going to look slick as hell. But yeah, I was really hoping for like this to be like Star Fox's moment to turn from one of the smaller franchises into one of the bigger franchises.
And it feels like that's what Nintendo were positioning it to do, because you don't put Star Fox into your biggest like movie of all time flippantly, right? Like, you do that with intention. You know, as much as they've said, oh, Illumination thought it was a good idea, so we didn't know. You fucking didn't. You knew that this game was going to happen. You knew that, you know, there was going to be synergistic opportunities for it. And inevitably, at some point, all these Nintendo universes are going to collide in some movie form or fashion. And so having Star Fox set up in the Mario Galaxy movie, and ostensibly people say that he's got, you know, an interesting part to play. At least it's fun to see him there. I still have not seen that movie, so I don't know what has happened with it. But I think his design there is really cool from what I've seen. Like, it's a really nice stylized version of Star Fox that feels like a modern idea of what he could be. And so I think there's an expectation, especially because there's a previous set expectation from Donkey Kong, where in the original Mario movie, Donkey Kong's design was different, and then Bonanza is equally the same style of Donkey Kong, and it feels like there was a synergy there between those two teams of the new version of Donkey Kong, right, going forward and changing from the original Rare design that has been the consistent one for so long. You know, it's an obvious expectation for a fan base to look at that Fox in the movie and say, well, there's rumors of the Star Fox game, it's probably going to look similar to that Fox, right? Because Nintendo love stylistic designs, and that's the direction they go in. And to get here, and I think it's very telling. You watch any reaction to this direct, and the first time that Fox comes on screen, you just look at people's faces and you're like, this is not a good reaction people are having to this stuff. I've seen a lot of people talk about it in terms of, oh, they're trying to do the puppet aesthetic, which is something I've talked about in the past, of like wanting to see. And I would want them to go all the way with it, like have strings, have like all this stuff look like an actual fucking Thunderbird set, essentially, and really lean into that. But they kind of tip their hand in the presentation, because they even say themselves, they look more like the real animals, don't they? You know, trying to say like, oh, we've gone in this direction. And really, it is the kind of taxidermy, like,
aesthetic. That's exactly it. Yeah,
that is the actual aesthetic here, and not, because I don't think it looks like the puppet stuff at all, frankly.
No, I don't know where people are getting that from, because like we've had multiple versions of Star Fox puppets officially. They don't look like this. No. Like this is not what that would look like in that situation. Like, I don't know. I have seen some people say they like the new style, and I think there's always going to be people who do quite like it. And I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think it was taxing. Like, it was one of those things, you saw it and you went, not what I expected. Like, it was never a style that was going to immediately stand out and go, wow. It feels like one you have to get used to. I don't really know where I am on that. I am excited for like the new cutscene sort of focus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I like Star Fox characters and I like the story of this game, and I think having that told in a more cinematic way suits it really well. It's something that should have been done sooner, quite frankly.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the thing that sold me most on this game was the final section where they showed the prologue cutscene with James
so cool.
and fucking Pigma and the betrayal of Pigma. You know, like, there's a real, you know, of course I'm going to think of it in this perspective, but this is a real opening of Xenoblade 1 betrayal here, you know? Yeah. There's a real kind of like, the trio, right, of folks. So I think it was really quite well done. I thought the voice acting was quite good. I thought the cinematic presentation was very good. And I also think those character models of all of them looked the best out of...
Yes.
I think like the worst of them is Fox and Falco. They both look...
Agreed.
Oh, pretty rough, I will say, in terms of like...
I think because they're the most established character designs. They're the ones that you know best. Like, mostly because of Smash Brothers as well, right? Like,
exactly.
Of all the characters, you know what Fox and Falco are meant to look like, and they've diverted quite heavily. I say Falco especially. Like, they've diverted quite heavily on like what his silhouette looks like. Like,
yeah, totally.
It doesn't immediately go, that's Falco.
It just reads as... You know what it reminds me of, actually, is that recent announcement of the fucking Chicken Dynasty Warriors game. Like... He looks like that chicken, you know? Like, he looks like a chicken more so than a...
The Crafton one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't... I think those two are the ones that I am the most turned off by, but when you put sunglasses on, you know...
James McLeod.
It actually works for me for some reason, but I agree with you, Pigma is, like, the one that stands out. As like, actually, I think Pigma looks great. Yeah, I think he looks really good.
Yeah, I think his design's fantastic. Like, they've really nailed that one down, which means that, like... But like, to not get Fox and Falco right feels like maybe it still wasn't the right direction to go.
Yeah. I think it's also like the weird, like, there's a double chinness to Fox, you know? Like there's a width to his neck and the way that it sits, and it just doesn't look. I think also you're missing the scarf as well. Like that's something that also feels like out of step. There's a way in which it just doesn't feel like the character. And I think I would be less critical of it if they weren't also leaning much heavier in a story direction, and therefore you're actually going to see these characters way more than you ever did in the N64 game.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in that game, it was very much while you're playing the level, these, characters will pop up on screen and you'll see their profile for a little bit. But now we're having full-on cutscenes in between these missions with all these characters talking to each other and interacting. And I think that's where the uncanniness comes in, and where I'm... it's where I would have loved to see a bit more of a stylized take on it, because I think those moments could have worked better. But there's also the argument to say, by being more realistic, by being more grounded, you are creating a bit more of a serious setup, and therefore having those cutscenes feel a bit more, like there's stakes to things going on, and that there's real, important things that are going to happen, and there's threats if one of the crew dies and that sort of thing. And I actually don't know narratively what happens in Star Fox 64, like if there's moments where Slippy can die on a route or something. Because to give my history with Star Fox, obviously Bally is much more of the Star Fox boy on this podcast and has connected with the series a lot more, as he tends to do with like vehicular based series. That's why Mario Kart and F-Zero and Star Fox is kind of his domain. My favorite Star Fox game is actually the Super Nintendo original. I really like that game. I had a great time playing it on the Super Nintendo Mini at the time, and thought it was just such an impressive game for the time and what they were able to achieve with it. Really thoroughly enjoyed playing that. And then I played Star Fox 64 through the 3DS version, and I basically played it one route through and then said I'd finished the video game. That was my experience with Star Fox 64, because I didn't really connect with it that strongly. I wasn't a huge fan of it, and I didn't want to go back and do the other routes and do all that sort of stuff. I do think this one's more appealing to me because the narrative hook is there to see the different routes the story can take, and I have been kind of drawn in by the way that prologue is presented, and I feel like the rest of the game, if it's presented in a similar fashion, gives me incentive to actually go and do those routes, even if they are a bit more challenging. But I also feel like, because this game is being positioned to newcomers, it will likely be a lot easier as an experience, and therefore I can go and do those harder routes without dying and messing up, in between. We were just talking about in the break about like games that frustratingly are retroly designed in the way they send you back. And I think Star Fox 64, even in the 3D version, if you died midway through a path, that kind of puts you back to the beginning. Am I correct on that, or am I imagining things?
You know what? I don't know. I don't think I died when I was playing it this time round.
Okay, too good of a gamer, as we all know. Yeah,
humble brag. But to be fair, I think I was playing the 3DS version, which might be easier as well.
Probably, yeah.
But yeah, you're right though, because this is ostensibly an arcadey game, right?
Yes,
it's part of the reason that I think they have struggled to know what to do with Star Fox since then, because it has a bit of a high score focus. Like, you can replay to do the like other routes and stuff like that, and like see different, and there are literally two endings of the game that you can get depending on which route you get. There is like a basic ending and then like a true ending, and the true ending is genuinely better. Like, it feels better to get.
Okay.
But also, if you don't know that, I don't know if you would go back and play through it, right? Like, it's especially these days, I don't know. I don't know what the appeal of this game is. Right. Which is not to say
who
that
is
I
this
don't.
For, I think.
Yeah,
is the question,
I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not to say that I don't like it. I'm just wondering, like, how many kids are going to play it off the back of the film and fall in love with it. I don't know if this sort of gameplay is as appealing these days.
Right. Because I think what you're kind of getting at, right, is there was a golden opportunity here for them to take that movie, introduce Star Fox to a bunch of younger people, and get them excited about the idea of a Star Fox game, with the idea that you could evolve the formula, that you could have an art style that aligns potentially with that version of the character, and then create an experience that is more modern in feel, that is more taking lessons from how these games have changed over the years, and potentially like jumping off of ideas they'd abandoned from Star Fox Assault, where they could have made something that like uses on the ground stuff as well as in the air stuff, and done it in a much better way given the way Nintendo has changed since that game was made, which would have resulted, I think, in a game that people would have been excited about, and therefore potentially pushed the just like prospects of Star Fox as a franchise within Nintendo. But what they've done instead is created an art style that is inherently, I think, in some ways going to actually scare off kids to some degree because of the way that it looks, and a gameplay style that is so hardcore and old school that I don't know that a modern player, a younger player, comes to this and enjoys it as much as people with nostalgia for it. So, yeah, I think I think as Star Fox people, fans in the ether out there are probably a little frustrated with this because I think the performance of this game is probably going to tell Nintendo a lot, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to do very well because of all the kind of reasons we've listed, right? Like, I just don't think it appeals to a wide group. And I think it's the only way in which it performs well is that the zeitgeist is talking about Star Fox right now, right?
Yeah.
And they've positioned it timing-wise to come close enough after the movie to where I think people are going to check it out, right? And I do think it's good, and it probably will end up being the best-selling Star Fox game just because by nature of Star Fox having never sold any copies at all, and Nintendo's reputation and like just ability to like get games to sell these days is much higher than it used to be from niche franchises.
100%. I do wonder how much crossover there is between the kids who went to see the Mario movie, that sort of age group, and the kid like who has Switch 2s.
Right,
because like the Mario movie is aimed quite young, from my understanding. Like it's not even sort of like like older kids. It's aimed mostly at younger kids.
It's like 5-6 year olds basically.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know how many of those would have a Switch 2 rather than a Switch as well.
Right.
Like,
yeah. So or any of them own any video game consoles at all, right? I think that's definitely.
Yes, but if they did, I'm guessing it'd be on the cheaper end, right? Until they're old enough to be trusted with a piece of kit that costs £300 that they hold in their hands and throw in a backpack. Like I am super curious to see how this does. Like it might do really well, and I'll be glad if it does, because it means that if they if this does well and they have an engine for it now and character designs ready and loaded for them to be like, we can now do another Star Fox game. For like, because clearly this is not a huge budget game. Like they're selling it for $49.99 in the UK boxed, which means it is not in their upper echelons of being a high budget Nintendo game. So if it sells well enough, we might actually get a new Star Fox game after this, maybe within the Switch 2 life cycle, which would be the ideal. I was just hoping for that, I think, before another remake.
Do you have any thoughts on who is making this game? Because I can see a world in which this is an external studio, right?
Yeah.
And in that sense, like there is a parallel to be drawn potentially between what Metroid has ended up doing recently, which is to say Mercury Steam were tapped to do a remake of Metroid 2, and then after that was well received, they made a sequel. They made a brand new video game in the series, which have been people wanting for a very long time. And potentially they are trying to do the same thing here, where, and maybe this is the reason that the game looks like this, right, and is so focused on fidelity, is that it's a studio they're working with who has experience in high fidelity games and are therefore, going to take the series forward potentially if this ends up doing well. Do you have any guesses? Do you think it's an internal Nintendo? Because I saw Next Level being thrown around by people as well.
Yeah, I saw Next Level thrown around, and I don't think that's like beyond the realm of possibility. It absolutely could be, but the funny thing about that, right, is Next Level has recently worked in such stylized stuff.
Very stylized,
I'd be surprised if they hadn't pitched it as being stylized.
Yeah, totally.
There's something about it to me that genuinely screams like internal Nintendo, and I can't quite put my finger on that. But I mean, one other option is potentially Bandai Namco, because Bandai Namco did Star Fox Assault, which
right, yeah.
Well, I think that's just Bandai potentially, or just Namco,
yeah.
even potentially even pre-merger for them. But they do have pedigree with Star Fox, and while I'd say for most companies that wouldn't count for anything, Nintendo's one of those weird companies where it feels like they could have just been like, hey, you did one before. Do you want to do one again? You've worked on Smash Brothers recently. There's a ton of Star Fox characters in that. It feels like they could be it. But yeah, beyond that, I don't have a ton of guesses, to be honest.
No, yeah, it does. It feels like... I do feel like if it was a significant external studio, like with Platinum and Star Fox Zero, they would have said the extra. Because I think the only time Nintendo do name developers is when they are external to them. Otherwise, it's just a case of, oh, just wait until it comes out and read the credits, then you'll know who made it. Which is an extremely frustrating place to be in. But yeah, I can see it being Bandai Namco, especially because they have the pre-existing relationship and they are not necessarily front and center when talking about games like Smash Brothers, right? So I think there's a degree to which they could be working on this and say, oh yeah, this is just the other, Bandai Namco team that helps Nintendo out with stuff, and they're not really that heavily credited as being from Bandai Namco specifically. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, when Bandai Namco works on Nintendo games, they're Nintendo games, aren't they? That's
exactly.
Potentially more so than any other studio that Nintendo works with. They're like, oh yeah, there's a load of people in a different company who work quite heavily on this, but this is Nintendo, which would make sense if they don't necessarily say anything about this. I've got to ask as well, what did you think of the actual gameplay footage that they showed off?
I mean, I thought it looks very nice. I think visually this game, like you said, is going to pop quite well. I don't know, I don't know Star Fox 64 that deeply, so it's hard for me to say what big changes there are, as it feels like there aren't. It feels like from a level design standpoint, it's the exact same. There's a tangential conversation we can have, of course, about Ocarina of Time, because this being confirmed ostensibly confirms the remake of Ocarina as well. And, having listened to the show, you're probably aware of my and Bally's thoughts on how that would be handled, given the way Nintendo tends to handle remakes. And I feel like, having seen this, I'm even more of the opinion that Ocarina of Time is going to be a pretty straightforward remake and not really do the Capcom Resident Evil or, the other big one, the Final Fantasy VII style of remake for Ocarina of Time. I think it's going to hew much closer to what Star Fox is doing here than anything else, and keep the original design, but make it look prettier and, maybe add a few additional things to the mix. So, yeah, I do think it looks nice, but again, as someone who has not played this game, it's hard for me to tell if there are any significant differences at all. You'd probably be better equipped to know.
Well, the only thing I got from it from watching it, and this might just be a little bit of pessimism that had already snuck in at that point from the slightly strange art design and the fact it was a remake, but I did watch a lot of the gameplay thinking that it looked quite slightly slow.
Okay.
Not necessarily because like you say, I imagine it will be playing at the exact same speed that it used to and stuff like that, but I thought that your ship just doesn't look like it's speeding through the air very much. It feels like there's something about the high visual fidelity and the lack of stylization in it that suddenly makes it look like a ship sort of floating through the sky.
Yeah,
rather than,
that makes sense.
I just didn't get a lot of action and the explosions when shooting things down. Everything looked almost overly smoothed, was my impression of it. I think it's a discussion that we've had about the SNES game, like you're saying, compared to the N64 game, where even the SNES game having this atrociously low frame rate, but it gives everything the explosions are big when they happen, and it has this quite cinematic feel. And I don't know, I think Star Fox 64, even though you're not moving so quickly through these levels, it has this momentum and pace to it, and I don't know whether it's a widescreen thing, a weird thing on having more field of view and stuff like that makes it doesn't feel as fast and cinematic. I might need to rewatch it again, but that was my initial sort of thing of being like.
I mean, now that you mentioned it and watching through the footage, I do see where you're coming from. It does feel like it's lacking that sense. I think the only time where it feels like there is a sense of speed is at the beginning, where they dip down to the water and you see the rush behind the wings, and that like almost physically represents the speed that is happening. But anytime you're away from that, it feels like, like you say, it feels maybe a little slow in the pace of it. And I'm sure when the game comes out, people will do endless comparisons about it, and there'll probably be like some YouTube video saying they slowed down Star Fox by 50%, and now it's not as quick and reactive. And you'll be hailed as Nostradamus for that when it comes. But
yeah, I just remember thinking it looked pretty, but didn't look exciting. Like not in terms of like, oh, it's a remake, it's not exciting. I just remember thinking the gameplay just didn't look very dynamic, which for all the things of the original Star Fox, that did feel quite like explosions and speed and all this. So just I don't know, that's a slight oddity about it. But it's funny you're saying about the Ocarina of Time remake, actually, because like you're right, it probably does speak volumes to what the remake is like, but I think it actually maybe at least says we're going to get a very, very pretty version of that, which, like, I remember even Bally was, like, saying the most Nintendo thing to do would just be to get the 3DS version up-resed.
Mm-hmm.
I think this suggests that, like, with Switch 2, with them knowing they've got some power in their console, they're fairly, like, in for the idea of being, like, going higher fidelity. To the point where I almost imagine when we get Ocarina of Time remake, some people are going to say that it's lost some stylization. Like, I think it might lean into being too pretty, like a God of War game as opposed to like a Twilight Princess or whatever.
Totally, yeah, I can see that being the case. I do think that Nintendo tends to, when it comes to revisiting these games, is like they almost go back to the original, like, key art for those games to some degree, and try and kind of replicate that feeling, because I feel like the 3DS version of Ocarina was very much that, right? It was how did Link look on the box cover of this? Well, I don't think he actually was on the box cover because it was like the weird golden,
but like in the manual and everything.
But in the manual, yeah, exactly, the way that he was kind of represented in like cartoon drawings and that sort of stuff. So I think it's a little harder to like maintain that with like a more modern aesthetic, but I think there's a way they can do it. I do think, because there's a few people who are talking about this as well, like when we think about this Star Fox remake being a bit more on the budget side of things, I certainly don't think that will be the case for Zelda, because they position Zelda as a premium series, and it's an important one for them to not undervalue, I guess. And so I wonder if that will mean it is a bit of a step further than this is, potentially. I think that's the only reason I could see for it being, a bit more significantly changed, is that kind of like aura around the series and how it has kind of grown in the last generation to become not only like a core, like identifying IP for Nintendo, but one of the biggest commercial successes for them as well. So yeah, very, very interested. I feel like that's going to be announced in the rumored Nintendo Direct for June. Which is probably gonna.
I'm really craving a full direct. Like, I feel like this has been our longest lull without one in a very, very long time.
It has been. I guess last question on this: do you think that part of the reason they dropped this direct 15 minutes beforehand is because Nintendo of America looked at the game and were like, "Oh boy, people are going to be mad about how this looks," and Japan were like, "No, it's fine," and they had to compromise essentially with, instead of doing like a pre-recorded Nintendo Direct, doing it live but announcing it at the last minute. Because I do think if they had announced Direct comes in 2 days or tomorrow, people work themselves into a hype mode about it that then results in even bigger disappointment when they see it's not the thing that they were imagining in their head.
Yeah, I think regardless of the reason, I think there's internal politics here, right? Like, I think it's probably a combination of that, of like, setting too much expectation with like a Star Fox Direct. Because even just saying we've got a Star Fox Direct coming up, like, sets people to expecting more than one Star Fox game. Like, that is people going, oh, maybe they're going to do a remake and a new game. Maybe they're going to do a new game for themselves, and maybe there's like a roguelike from an indie developer, like the Crypt of the Necro Dancer type
brace
situation.
Yourself. Yeah.
So I think some of it would have been, expectation setting. And I think some of it is probably around the leak, genuinely. I think they probably had plans to announce it at a certain point. I reckon this leak is like a big one from them. And it maybe speaks to the idea that maybe this isn't made internally at Nintendo, right? Because it's rare for people to know about internal Nintendo projects like this. But for a first-party game to have a marketing leak, basically, to be like, this is getting announced soon, I reckon they just might have put it on pause for a while they dealt with that situation. And then it ends up in a strange place where you're like, we got to get this out eventually. It's out in 2 months or whatever. And then gets put out very strangely the way it does after a lot of internal politicking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will say, when I first started watching it and it was called Star Fox Direct, I was like, oh, maybe there's another game. I was hanging on to the end.
Same.
Maybe they're going to tease, like, the future of it's like, here's the remake. Yeah. But, no. And then also, we are working on another Star Fox game. And no, of course they're not going to do that, because they need to see how this sells, how this does, and then they'll make decisions around what, if anything, to do with Star Fox in the future.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they spin it off into... Because, like, this game has online multiplayer as well, which is, like, not something I'm hugely interested in, but is cool. Obviously, like, that is a new thing for this. But maybe there's a future where there is a standalone, like, free-to-play online game for Star Fox. There's a ton of ways they could take this, but I think, genuinely, more than anything else, I just want a completely brand new Star Fox game at some point in the future, if only to see, like, how this series can evolve, because I truly believe that it can.
Yeah. As a long-standing 2D Metroid fan, I know the pain of the Star Fox fan base. It's real painful to just sit there and be like, just give us a new fucking video game, And I don't know. It's everyone always goes back to the old Miyamoto thing of like, well, we can't think of an original idea, so we can't make a game. And yet here we are with Star Fox, where the only game they make is an unoriginal idea every single time. And it's like, okay, can we? Where's our F-Zero? And it's frustrating, I think, for many people involved. I guess the last thing on this that we haven't touched on is the whole camera interaction, which I find very funny. And it just every time the first party Nintendo game comes out, it's like, okay, how are they going to use the stupid things that no one is using on the console? Because we're still in that window, that like launch window of the system to some degree, first couple of years, where it's like, they're going to keep just using this stuff in funky ways that no one else is going to. So yeah, I'm glad that they are still very stupid and decide to make people VTubers out of these characters. It's great. I look forward to many people making videos that involve that and doing machinimas and that type of stuff with it, because it feels like there's a lot of stuff you could get out of that.
A lot of mileage for sure. They're selling bundles on the My Nintendo store of the game and a camera.
Right.
Like,
I'm surprised they haven't done a branded camera that looks like some kind of R-Wing or something. I don't know, like it feels like there's something they would do just to like tie it in, but yeah, it does make sense that they're selling them together. Did you buy a camera, by the way, for the Switch 2?
Oh, no. It's one of those things, I never would have used it. I simply never would have used it. And if it had been maybe like 30 quid, I might have considered it. But like the actual good camera is so expensive. I probably should do it, because knowing me, in like 10 years' time, I'll be like scrounging CEX or eBay for a version of it, which is like double the price now.
Yeah.
So I probably need to maybe consider it the next time I get like, I don't know, like a bonus or something, just to be like, let's just get that camera out of the way for the inevitable time in 10 years where you go, I want to play that weird eShop game Nintendo released that only use the camera.
Yeah. It's going to happen. So yeah, that's very, very good. Cool. So Star Fox obviously has been rumored for a long time, which has led, Matt, you down one of your usual rabbit holes, which is to say, let's get prepared for this moment. So let's play every Star Fox game back to back. How many Star Fox games have you played, and where are you at in that journey currently?
Okay, so previously, the only ones that I'd completed were the SNES game and the other SNES game, Star Fox and Star Fox 2.
Oh, Star Fox 2, the one that was released on the Mini, right?
Yes, yeah. And is currently on NSO as well.
Yes, they added it, didn't they? Yeah, that's really cool.
So those are the two that I have played. I've played Star Fox 64 tons and just never reached the end of it. Like, I think, which is crazy, it's such a short game. So the amount of times that I've played about an hour and a half rather than 2 hours of it and then not finished it must be crazy at this point. But so I went through, I played N64, then I played Adventures. Yes, Star Fox Adventures.
Right.
Then Assault, then Command, and then Star Fox Zero.
Okay, so you didn't go back to the first two then, because you'd already kind of gone through them previously.
I've played them quite extensively in the past, so I've got a pretty strong grasp of my feelings for those ones.
Right, that makes sense. What's your feeling on the series? You kind of said before you weren't like a huge fan of it and have maybe become one now. Like, what's your overall kind of like thoughts on how it's gone over time, and what are the things you would maybe, you know, in a world where this wasn't the Star Fox game that got announced, what you would like them to pull on from strings of the past?
Okay, very quick. Star Fox Assault, flawed but good, and good ideas and fun pushing forward of the story for the first proper time, and like cool cinematic voice acting. And there's a moment in Star Fox Assault where Wolf, who's a bad guy in 64, comes around and saves you on a planet because your R-Wing blows up, and then you sit on the wing of Wolf's R-Wing shooting with a rocket launcher at a load of things as you fly through the sky.
Oh, and shit, okay.
It's the coolest fucking thing ever. Like, it's so simple in terms of being like, yeah, of course this is cool. Like, this is playing Assault is made it hit a little bit harder, the remake announcement, because I was like, oh, I can see the only problem with Assault is that it's a 2005 game, which is probably when Nintendo was like at its least confident in terms of what it was doing.
Right.
Like,
it's
that
like
sort of
end of or middle of GameCube era.
100%. Yeah.
They're putting out games in all their franchises, but obviously the GameCube is not selling well, and so none of these games are selling well. And also, I mean, it's given to an external studio, like you say.
Yeah.
And so not a huge amount of love a lot of love has gone into it, but not enough time for it to be molded into a thing of quality, I would say.
Yeah, and it's a strange game as well because it looks like it was built quite heavily around multiplayer, but not online multiplayer. So, like, have you ever played the Star Wars Battlefront games on, like, the PS2?
Yes, I did at friends' houses for sure.
Yeah. So you know how, like, the maps for those are built to be like battle maps, like they're fairly like symmetrical,
like really large, yeah, spaces. Yeah.
Yes, and like almost to the point you can get lost in them sometimes. Like they're quite big spaces, and there's like different things found around them. And there's obviously like space battles in those where like you can get in a ship and fly outside and fly around. You could fly back in and get out of your ship. All this, like I'd say about half the single player levels you can tell are multiplayer levels that have been made to work in single player. So these are most of the on foot ones, and that's where the on foot stuff falls down. They don't give you like a corridor level to go down, which is like, it makes perfect sense because Star Fox is a rail shooter. So just give people like a linear corridor to go down with like very cool shooting and like movement. I think I talked to you about this before, but like give Fox like Doom style like finishers, like let him shoot people and then like dash to people with his Smash Brothers move.
Oh, dude,
to
so good.
Finish people off in melee to give like a real forward momentum as you work through an on foot bit before you jump back in your ship and move off. Assault falls down because it gives you a big level to work in and a load of targets to try and find in a level that's made for multiplayer, which literally means there are hiding spaces. Like some of them have like tunnels underground that you have to like find and you get lost in. It just doesn't work, but it's because of when it came out and the sort of design principles that it was working on. It absolutely would work now. So it's weird to me that like Assault keeps getting pointed out as like, the N64 formula is perfect and you can't go past that. Because I'm like, No, it just was a bad time for it. They've not tried since to do that.
And it feels like a mandate from them, because, I mean, that era was riddled with multiplayer modes in games that didn't need them. You know, another first-party Nintendo game, Metro Prime 2, which is like a, you know, split-screen shooter, essentially, where you go around and you find power-ups and you know, fight against each other. And so it does feel like Nintendo mandated the team to have multiplayer in the game, and given the development timeline and everything and budget, they weren't able to do both that and the on-foot sections, and so it kind of got collapsed into one, and as a result has hurt the game, because at that point in time, local multiplayer was all the rage. People had friends' houses all the time, and so that probably was a bigger priority, I think, than maybe making a great single-player Star Fox game, especially because Nintendo already had a single-player fully focused Star Fox game on the GameCube already. It's wild to me that there's 2 original Star Fox games on the GameCube, and neither of them are in any way like analogous to 64, which I think just speaks to the GameCube generally.
Yeah, I mean, Adventures it was a wild ride, man. Like I had a really good time with it, because I think I'm so nostalgic for that sort of like era of, it's not a platformer, but like a wide open sort of adventure game from that era. It obviously leans more into the Zelda style of things, but it's such it's got a bit of like Jak and Daxter about it as well, just without the jumping,
right.
Like in terms of the way that you have like a hub that you start in and you move out in different directions in the world, and you know, there's a little bit of like Ratchet and Clank to it, not a lot, but there's a bit of my brain that just went like burr when I was playing it, because those are the games that I grew up with. It has some like terrible levels. There's one of the few on-rail sections in Star Fox Adventures is when you're on the back of a pterodactyl and you're flying around, you have to shoot these towers, and you do a big rotation shooting these towers, and it has the awful, you know, like, this is a thing that Rare did and then seemed to keep for ages, like the GoldenEye style of zooming in with a cursor on the screen, where the cursor defaults to the middle of the screen, and you've got to move the analog stick to like push it to the edge of the screen. If you let go of the analog stick, it snaps back to the middle.
Yeah.
Awful.
That's bad.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And like, so I think I was playing this section on the pterodactyl for maybe an hour, trying to beat it and just dying over and over again, which again was quite nostalgic for that era. It just like, it wouldn't have gotten through QA these days at all. It was basically broken.
I mean, there's some of that at the very start of the game. So Star Fox Adventures is interesting because it is one of my childhood games to some degree, in that I had it on GameCube at the time when it came out. It was one of the first GameCube games that I owned, and I never really got too far in it. Probably part of it is the kind of difficulty to some degree, but you know, that opening I've played many times, and the reason is that I had a memory card that would constantly corrupt itself, and so I lost my progress for Star Fox Adventures, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. So I am very familiar with the opening of Star Fox Adventures with Crystal, where you're shooting the ship as you are flying behind it, which I imagine is the same control scheme as the kind of pterodactyl section you're talking about.
No.
It doesn't have the same control scheme?
No.
That's fucking wild. That's crazy.
A much worse control scheme. The bit you've played is a half decent control scheme. The pterodactyl bit is much worse.
That's insane that they did that when you already have the tech. Wow. Okay. That's Well, anyway, I never actually had too much trouble with it, so that's why I was kind of questioning that. But that makes a lot of sense that it was actually different in that case. But yeah, I've done that section a lot. I think the crystal stuff was interesting, but like, I think it just underutilized probably throughout the game, right? Like, you kind of do that stuff at the beginning, and then she gets put into a crystal. Wow, look at that, that's her name. And then I don't know the situation later on with the narrative of she breaks out or whatever. But I guess that's the other cool thing about Assault, is that Crystal is like a part of the team in Assault, and like, now she doesn't exist in this game because it's prior to her having existed in the franchise as well. So yeah,
Assault's genuinely really cool because it does call back to obviously N64. Like, it brings back Fox and a bunch of characters and like acknowledges everything that has happened in 64. Right. Like, it has it's driving the plot to a certain extent. Also acknowledges Star Fox Adventures. You go back to Dinosaur Planet in Star Fox Assault, and there's like a grown-up Tricky there, the Triceratops.
Oh shit, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a small moment, right? But it is like, I don't know, I really like this stuff. I always feel a bit silly for it because I think stuff like the MCU now has put people off the idea of like they're like, oh, you don't have to have a continuing story, like it gets too complicated. I'm like, that's true when you have like 30 films, but like give us 4 Star Fox games in a row that like have a continuous story, and no one's going to lose their minds, you know. Like,
look, if you like, I was going to say, if you like that stuff, you're doing the right thing, because I know you're reading through some Brandon Sanderson right now. And let me tell you, if you're on the fantasy equivalent of that is exactly what he's doing. So,
but we know Nintendo can do it, right? Because like Bonanza recently was absolutely that. Bonanza went,
oh gosh, the ending of Bonanza is so good. I love all of that
and it
stuff.
Goes,
it's amazing.
Yeah, all the stuff in the games that you've played before happened. Like, it's like, yeah, all these people exist. These things happened before this game, and now you're here. And this is Pauline, and she's going to turn up later in like the timeline. Like whatever the situation is, they basically went, yeah, we're going to continue a story here somehow in some way, and that's for a series that doesn't actually have a very like distinct storyline. Like,
yes,
I wouldn't think of Donkey Kong as being as story driven as a Star Fox game, which obviously takes so many cues from Star Wars. But it has more of that. So yeah, to play Assault and to see a game where it goes, hey, who's filling the Andros power vacuum, and then what happens there after that, and what's this new enemy faction that arrives, and like, I didn't like Command on the DS very much at all, but that does also still continue the story beyond Assault. That brings in like one of the early villains in Assault then turns up in Command. And that has like a lot of like branching story paths and things like this. And in Command, General Pepper has retired, and Peppy is older, and he's the general now.
Interesting.
Like,
okay.
It's not a lot, but I do like it, and I just think that like, I don't know if it's the Star Fox being Miyamoto's baby thing, and famously Miyamoto hating story.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like it feels like, if it ever does progress beyond 64 again, which it hasn't done since Command, I think.
Yep, Command's the last one, isn't it?
It will be someone else pushing that, rather. Do you know what I mean? Like, it'll be
totally
Koizumi or something along those lines.
I remember during the era when I, had my Ace card on DS and I was just downloading ROMs for everything. I did try Star Fox Command and was kind of baffled by it, if I'm honest with you, about like the strategy map stuff, and like I didn't understand any of how that worked. It's just not the type of gameplay that I am suited for, and I bounced off it pretty quickly. So it sounds like you also didn't fully connect with that stuff.
Yeah. The strategy, to be fair, the strategy stuff is actually the best thing in it, I think. It is.
Oh wow, okay.
It is interesting, and like, the further you get in the game, so at the beginning, when you like, it has one of the worst tutorials forever because you only have Fox's ship at the beginning. So like, there's no strategy beyond move Fox to where the things that you have to deal with are, right?
Right.
By the end, you've got 4 ships that you're controlling, and you draw all the paths of where they're going to move next turn at the same time to intercept different enemies at different points, and to like choose whether to like grab a missile so that your home base is protected, or whether to take down a city, which then gives you like a resource that means you get another turn. So it's sometimes like between defending your mothership and getting extra turns to do the things you need to do. The strategy stuff gets decent when you start to do it. It never goes on for long enough. Like, it could have been like 2 or 3 times as long strategy wise to really like lead into that, and just never gets there.
Is it almost like turn-based battles where you enter engagements into these enemies and then it kind of zooms you into a Star Fox level?
100%.
Okay. Yeah.
But this is the thing. It doesn't zoom you into a Star Fox level. It zooms you into what is it they call it? All range mode?
Or yes, like the kind of dogfighting style.
Every time you actually do like real time gameplay, it's all range mode. Like,
okay.
And it's against like you're just in every single time you're just in the mountains somewhere. And there are a bunch of enemies around, and there are like 2 or 3 enemies that you have to take out to complete the mission, and you've got a time limit on that, and the time limit carries over to the next thing that you do. So you want to do it quickly to try and maintain as much time as you can. But like you just hunt down the big enemies, and then you shoot them, and then you either have to destroy the mothership, which is like you follow some rings through, or you don't. And then there's a load of other enemies just to be annoyance, but there's no point in going after them really. It's so strange because it controls really nicely with the stylus. Like, it has good touchscreen controls for a ship. There's just nothing interesting in the battles themselves. Like, I never found them particularly interesting or good. Also, the bombs are massively overpowered, because when you're in those battles, the touchscreen at the bottom shows you where you are and where all the enemies are, like a radar, and you drag the bombs onto the radar. So, like, if you just wait for a load of enemies to group together and drop a bomb on them, like, I finished a few of those levels in 3 seconds.
Wow. Damn. Okay.
So, like, and not for any skill, I just went, oh, they're all together, bomb.
Let's just
that was
destroy
them.
Him. Yeah.
So yeah, very strange game. Feels. Yeah. It's one of those games where, like, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is a DS game, it's a handheld game, right? Like, I saw screenshots of it and went, oh, they did Star Fox, but handheld. Looking at it now, I'm like, I imagine the budget on that was nothing at all.
Oh, it must have been, yeah. Given the limitations in scope.
Like, I think it's basically a full price indie game. Like, wasn't given the time to be properly finished.
No, despite the fact that it has seemingly like 25 endings and they all have really weird resolutions and all this stuff. I've seen a lot on the internet about the endings of Star Fox Command in particular, and some of them are pretty funny in terms of what they do and how things change and the bad endings and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I imagine you didn't go through and play it so many times to get all those endings.
No,
but,
I was quite content with Command to be like, I have seen enough of this now.
Yeah.
Crystal ran off with, I think, Panther from Star Wolf.
Okay, all right.
Which is like, I mean, he's got a sexy voice in Star Fox Assault, so like, I can't knock it.
They're both blue, so you know. There you go. It's definitely a really interesting one that I often think about, and I'm like, I like DS aesthetics a lot, so I've been drawn to it to some degree, but it's always, I don't know, it's very funny that you say the strategy stuff is the best part, because I've always been turned off by that element of it. So yeah, it's a weird game, very weird game.
Super weird game.
Yeah, and you did, many times I have actually been in a CEX and seen Star Fox Zero for about £8, and I'm always like, should I buy that, should I not? And then we had a chat about it, and I was like, I don't think I am ever going to want to play this game after that, because it sounds like Zero is an interesting game. Bally, a big fan of it. I know that he, played it when it came out, really got on with the controls, unlike most people, and, had a lot of good things to say about it. Sounds like you didn't come to that same conclusion.
It would be a good Star Fox game, I think, but the controls, I don't think the controls add anything to like 90% of the game. It's funny because it starts you off in this area where there's like these bugs that have, an area that you can only attack from above on them. So like you do a flyover and you aim the Wii U gamepad down and shoot at them, and it's like, this would be so difficult if you didn't have the second screen. It's like, fine. And then the rest of it is just mostly a Star Fox game that is made much more difficult by a gamepad that is frequently, like, not losing sync necessarily, but like, you're like, where is this aiming now? I've lost track of where this is aiming. I want to aim straight forward now. So I was looking to my left. I'm going to bring the gamepad straight in front of me. Okay, the gamepad is no longer aiming straight forward. So where do I need to move this now so it's aiming straight forward? Now I'm having to hold this at a different angle to the TV, despite the fact that in both I should be looking dead ahead. The actual cursor on the TV doesn't aim where the gamepad is aiming, so you can't just use the TV if you want to. I just felt like I was fighting it the entire way, and like, I don't know. The one caveat I'll say here is that, like, my Wii U is very now old and dusty, right? It's a launch one. I don't know if it's performing worse than like it would have done when Star Fox Zero came out. Like, I don't know if like the gyrometer in it or whatever is aging and bad. So there's a chance that on like a fresh Wii U system, this plays a lot better. But like, it did feel like I was fighting it the whole way. Like I just wanted to put the gamepad down and just like give me a normal controller, make the cursor on the screen point where it says it's going to point, and I could still play this game and I'd have a much better time with it.
Yeah. I think it's I do remember talking about the all-range stuff in Zero and enjoying it more because of the flexibility to move stuff around. But I think in practice for me, I know myself well enough, and I think despite the fact this is one of those stranded games that will never really leave the Wii U, it's one of the rare Wii U games that will permanently be an exclusive, I feel like I still, even with the curiosity, I think I would get quite frustrated with it and the way that it's kind of built. But I'm glad it exists. It's a cool, weird experiment, and definitely, the one kind of like touch point between Command and now, right? Like there's Star Fox had been abandoned for such a long time, and I think the Wii U has GameCube energy, let's say, to some degree. So I wasn't surprised that a Star Fox game showed up on there. But it would have been nice for it to, I don't know, focus on something else. But I think the Nintendo at that era were so struggling for reasons to buy a Wii U, like what is the thing about the Wii U that makes games interesting? How do we utilize the specific tablet and everything to make it work? I guess Star Fox was the guinea pig for that kind of like controller experimentation. Don't know if you remember the Project Giant Robot and Project Guard. Project Guard turned into Star Fox Guard, which was the sub game that came along with this. That I think people kind of liked. It was like it's almost Five Nights at Freddy's to some degree, right? It's like a tower defense.
I like it fine. Like I didn't play it recently, but I at the time I played it more than Zero. Like I bought the double pack that came out when Zero came out, and I think I maybe put like double the amount of time into Guard in the end.
Wow.
Like because it's fairly simple, but it's a much better use of the gamepad in terms of like it doesn't require you to. It does require you to split your attention, but not in a way where it feels like you're doing something wrong by not looking. Like, if you end up looking at the gamepad for a while to, shoot a robot, and then you look up at the telly and you suddenly see that the other screens, there's something going on, it's more of a, oh shit, I didn't pay enough attention, that's on me. Switch back and forward, which feels exciting. Whereas in Zero, it's like, okay, I'm looking at the gamepad because I need to shoot this thing, and you look up at the screen, like, there's a Landmaster bit in Star Fox Zero that I was really like nearly my breaking point. I did end up finishing the game, but it was one of these things where I was like, I don't know what you want from me here. Like, in terms of like, I'm trying to steer this thing away from the big stumpy robot while shooting at the big stumpy robot, and the game was just like not letting me do that in a way that was satisfying at all. And it just felt like pure. I got to the end of the level and I was like, I don't feel like I did anything cool there. Like, it didn't feel like an earned victory. It felt like I just stumbled my way through. Whereas, I think Guard, you're like, the panic of it is intentional and part of the design. And it has almost like a fun multiplayer. Actually, that is the other thing. Is if you ever were to play Zero, if you ever had a day where you went, I'm desperate to play Star Fox Zero. Like, get me or someone, because I'm desperate to see what that's like in co-op.
Oh,
because I think the idea of one person looking at the screen and driving the ship, and the other person being like the gunner on the gamepad, is really fun. I think that's actually a good idea. So I'm really curious to see how that works.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that at all, but that was the era of asynchronous, or I guess asymmetric is the term, right? Where, Nintendo Land obviously split things between the gamepad player and the people on the TV. So, yeah, I've totally forgot that Zero kind of did some of that funky stuff as well. Super interesting. I think it's definitely a game that is a black mark for many people on the series, but, I think it just... of the time, right? It just made sense that would be the game that they would put out then. And I think it's just like, emblematic of Nintendo in that era of like having something like Project Garden, Project Giant Robot as well as such a they would never do that today. Of like they're like, we're so strapped for things that we can even show people. Here's a prototype we've been working on. Like you would never see. It's basically an internal Nintendo prototype.
Yeah.
And it's funny that they both kind of turned into things because I believe Giant Robot ended up being a Labo thing in the end, right?
Yeah, I think people have. I don't know if they've actually confirmed that one. Like Project Guard was an easy like, yeah, this is Star Fox Guard.
This was the same thing.
I think Giant Robot might have ended up being the Labo thing. I mean, the connection looks pretty obvious.
Yes.
But yeah, but you're
definitely.
right. That was a wild era for that. Like those ones are one thing. Like, do you remember like when Breath of the Wild hadn't been revealed, but they kept showing it just sort of like running in the background while Miyamoto and
Aonuma?
Yes, Aonuma were just talking about it and be like, yes, Zelda Wii U, da, 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 and you just had Breath of the Wild running out of focus in the background, which we would never do these days.
Yeah, this is the famous Bally fell asleep during the Game Awards moment where this was shown at the Game Awards and Bally was like on Skype with me and we were watching it and I was like, oh my god, it's Zelda, and Bally was like he had fallen asleep while watching it, which was very, very funny. But yeah, it was an odd time to be a Nintendo fan for sure. But yeah, we're here now, and hey, so is Star Fox. He's back. So yeah, very curious. I don't know. I think I would want to check this out.
I think it's an odd time again. That's my thing. Like the Switch 2 era is feeling strange to me at the moment. Like it's not Wii U. It's not as bad, but I do think the Switch 2 era is feeling stranger than the Switch era. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think there's just some interesting games that are being forefronted, right? I think to some degree it's sensible from Nintendo. Like the Switch 2, we are now in the generation of the 3DS kids, right? And what I mean by that is that every kid who grew up with a 3DS is now an adult and has money to spend. And there's been this interesting like set of video games that I traditionally would not think would sell very well and have done extraordinary numbers because of this nostalgia. So Fantasy Life, Inazuma 11, now Tomodachi Life. These are games that thrived on the 3DS when kids were young and played them and have strong nostalgia. And now all these games are returning in this generation and are actually doing really well. So I don't think Nintendo is necessarily financially in a bad place, but I think for people like us whose nostalgia is not necessarily that, it's a weird place to find ourselves, I guess, in terms of the types of games that are being forefronted, right?
Yeah.
You know, even Photopia, right, is kind of riffing on a Minecraft generation to some degree.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting lineup that they have kind of cultivated here. And I wonder, it does feel like maybe with Ocarina and Star Fox, this is why they're trying to like communicate to us again. They're like, hey, you guys, you come back. We want you again. So yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what the rest of this year holds, and I feel like that June Nintendo Direct is going to have a lot of answers potentially. So,
yeah, I'm excited for that one. I reckon they've not been announcing stuff a lot at all recently. June Direct feels like they could really push into 2027 as well, which feels like the absolute Wild West at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, actually funny you say about Ocarina of Time, because will that appeal to the 3DS kids? Maybe.
I mean, Star Fox, right? Star Fox, I blue skied about this as well, but I was like, I guess we're just doing the first year of 3DS again with the Star Fox 64 remake and an Ocarina of Time remake, because that was the lineup for the first year of the 3DS. So, that's, it rhymes, as they like to say. So yeah, we're back where we were. Great. Well, I think that is going to do us for this episode of the podcast. Matt, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Is there anywhere that people can find you? Do you want people to find you? It's a great question in the year 2026.
Don't come looking for me. Whatever you do. I'm on Blue Sky at Matt Lorigan. If I am anywhere else, you can just find me normally at Matt Lorigan as well. Like it's my name, and apparently it's no one else's name, so it's always my username. Yeah.
Yeah, very strong, very strong. Great. You can find Matt in the Discord as well. He's always hanging out there talking to people. So it's a good time. So you can join our Discord. That's linked in the description, as well as our YouTube channel. But yeah, if you would like to support the podcast, you can definitely do that. That's an option that you have available to you. If you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, you can support the show, like many people have. And we'd like to thank some of our supporters. They are Sullivan C, Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK Alan, Orange Thunder, Nintendo Man, and Turtle. And thank you all for your generous support of the show. Keeps it going. It keeps us doing bonus episodes, which you can find over there on Patreon, which is great. I think... I don't know. I guess next month is going to be all of the announcements from Summer Game Fest, so that's probably going to be what we talk about, I imagine. So look forward to that. Yeah, you can find us in various places on the internet. You can find me on Blue Sky at NBZ. You can find Bally at Ballyman91. I won't spell it out. That's his job and his job only. But I'm sure you can figure it out for yourself. And you can find the podcast at TNL Podcast on there also. And you can email the show if you want. We didn't do emails this week because we went deep on Star Fox. But if you have thoughts on Star Fox, which I'm sure many of you out there do, you can email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. And send us your thoughts on Star Fox, the guy, the man, the myth, the legend. We didn't even talk about the fact that they're just calling this game Star Fox, by the way.
Yeah.
We're now going to have to do, same as Hitman 2016, same as all these games, have to put the year after it now. Donkey Kong 94,
yeah.
Star Fox 26, that's it. Star
Tomb
Fox
Raider
26.
2013, all of that.
Yes, yeah, classic, as we all know and love. Prey, was it Prey 20? God, I actually don't know what the Prey one was, because there was Prey and then Prey and then Prey 2. Yeah, maybe Prey 2017. Yeah. Anyway, it's I don't know. I don't know. Come up with something creative. I guess the problem with this is it is 64, so there's not really a good way to redo that aside from saying 64 remake again. So, but alas, it's hard out there naming video games. I know it as having been behind the scenes on trying to name video games. It's really fucking difficult, let me tell you. So, yeah, it's I don't begrudge them too much for that. Great. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully Bally will have transformed back from a snake into a boy, and that would be great. But until then, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The musical interlude used on today's show was the main theme from Star Fox 2026, copyright Nintendo 2026.